Welcome, people from St. Francis in Bakersfield. We're on the Gospel of St. Mark, and we are dealing now with the 5 conflictual episodic events in the life of Jesus as he relates to the eldership of Israel. We have covered them briefly, namely the curing of the paralytic, the call of Levi, the question of fasting, the issue of plucking grains on and then the man with the withered hand. We are at the point where they now accuse Jesus of the ultimate accusation. There is a theological issue. The Torah teachers, the scribes and Pharisees, the Sadducees have a right to sit on the chair of Moses ex cathedra and to articulate and interpret the Torah in a meaningful way, because the Torah is the very word of God articulated through human speech for the benefit of us. So again, someone had the one thing about Judaism and Christianity, someone has to have the legitimate authority to interpret God's revelatory self-disclosure. The law, the prophets, and the wisdom or sapiential writings contained within the Hebrew scriptures, or what we call the Tanakh, or the Hebrew Bible. They had a right, the scribes and Pharisees had a right to interpret the Torah. Now, at the time of Jesus, you could have multiple interpretations and therefore applications of Torahic writing. And the problem is always going to be, how do you take the citations found in the Torah, the 613 mitzvahs, and now make them applicable in a real concrete, humane way, so that the person that is following God's law explicitly in their life, to the best of their ability, can attain some sort of a moral union with this God that has loved them into existence. Okay, so that's the issue. However, there is a problem that Jesus has a definitive understanding of how the Torah should be understood and then made applicable. And under certain circumstances, this does not come off well. So our last pursuit was with the man with the withered hand, and it's the Sabbath, and you cannot produce, create, or transform anything on the Sabbath. God had 6 days of creation. He rests on the 7th. And so therefore we're made in the image and likeness of God. So we too rest on the Sabbath. That is a mitzvah. That is a command. That's one of the 10 commandments, okay? This is not an option. It is a command. So if you want this moral union with this infinite God that has loved you into existence, then you will follow the commands explicitly to the best of your capability. It's not an option. And if you choose not to, then that's tantamount to apostasy from the religion of Israel. The problem is, how do you make applicable the 613 mitzvahs contained within Torah? And most especially in this particular juncture, the Sabbath laws. So, as I said earlier, in different preaching segments, that the role of the Pharisee, Sadducee, or scribe contained within the New Testament, some of these individuals gave a rather rigorous understanding of application. However, as I said earlier, depending on extra biblical non-canonical writings, there are writings dating to that time period, the time period of Jesus or shortly after Jesus, writings that are non-canonical, non-biblical, and they relate to some of the historicity issues and fact issues at the time of Jesus. Like, for example, the Jewish Wars or Jewish Antiquities by Josephus. And so we come with this notion that what is seen in sacred scripture, kind of a rigorous interpretation of halakha, the application of Torah to a moral setting. That's halakha, deals with Jewish law. Some of the extra biblical citations or documentations have the rabbis or the Pharisees and Sadducees rather liberalizing. They would give easily dispensations from the actual codification and application of Torah. So there's a conflict here. Okay, so at this point, Jesus and his application is different from the application of people in his own contemporary time period. And there's a profound conflict. And when he cures the man with the withered hand, did he have to do that on the Sabbath? Could he do it the following day? Well, he could do all sorts of things. And so after Jesus cures on the Sabbath, the Pharisees consult with the Herodians how to dispatch Jesus. We want him to expire quickly. We want him destroyed. So at this juncture, they say, how do we get about to do this? But there is a theological conundrum. He's doing good things, but his way of doing things is different from ours, and yet he's curing people, and yet he has this power somehow, this actual dynamis, this power to do something that only God does in the Old Testament: take away sin, cure illnesses, etc. Because he's now curing the multitudes. Okay, so what do we say? What do we do? We say the following: the reason why he's doing this, or has the ability to do this, is that he's in link with Beelzebub. That's going to be the accusation against Jesus. First, that he's out of his mind. So he's not to be trusted. In fact, in Mark, there's that very clear understanding that Jesus, by some of his family members, or those that knew him well, thought that he was out of his mind. And now, whether or not they actually held that, or they wanted to say that to save him from being assassinated, that's another issue, because they're out to get him. So how do we disarm Jesus? Well, we resist Jesus. We try to refrain him from doing what he always does, take him and get him out of the area. Well, he is not going to go willingly. So he stays where he is. So they say, well, we can't get him out of here. We fear that he might die. So what do? We say, well, he's out of his mind. He's not quite well today. Now, whether that they actually meant that, or they really believe that he was out of his mind, that remains to be seen by way of personal interpretation of how you would read the actual text. Okay. Are they trying to save him from being assassinated? Well, could be. So what do the Pharisees say? He's in link with Beelzebub. He's in link with Satan himself. That's why he's able to do what he does. He's aligning himself with God's opposite, namely the dark satanic powers. And the satanic powers have the ability to act like God. Well, that's absolute blasphemy. And that's blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, to ascribe to Satan divine activity. That's not going to happen. But that's exactly what they say about Jesus. He's in link with the evil one. Then Jesus says, wait a minute here. Why would Satan drive out Satan? That makes no sense whatsoever. So their argumentation, they lose. And now, so what are we going to do now with this Jesus? There must be another way of getting him dispatched. We got to get him out of the way. Well, before they do that, Jesus is going from one place to another. We are now on chapter 4 of Mark's gospel, the stilling of the storm. Mark chapter 4, 35, 41. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, let us go across to the other side, or the other side of the lake, Gennesaret. And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat against the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion, and they woke him and said to him, teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Jesus, we're going to drown here. Do something. Don't you care? Don't you know? Wake up. He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, peace, be still. Then the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? So that's the question here. And they were filled with great awe and said one to another, who is this then, that even the wind and the sea obey him? So not only does Jesus have power over nature, human nature, fallen human nature, to the point that he can cast out sin, and the effect of sin is paralysis. He can cast out that. He can cast out the demonic. He can heal people. He's healing the multitudes. He's in the act of restoration of a fallen human creation, okay? And now he has power over the natural elements. The sea, the wind, the sky, the storm obey him. Because he's Lord. He has jurisdiction over the creation that he himself caused to exist. Remember, God the Father creates through the Logos. The Logos is the reason, the will, the law, and the mercy of God. And that reason, will, and mercy of God took on flesh in the person of Jesus Christ. So it's Jesus who is the Logos, the very word of God made flesh, that has power over creation, because God the Father created everything that exists through the Logos. So he has jurisdiction. Jesus has jurisdiction over creation because he is the Logos. So they get over to the other side into Gerasene territory, and there is this demoniac. Okay. Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 10. They came to the other side of the sea, the country of the Gerasenes. And when he had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit went to him and was met by him. This man, again, he lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain. So here's a man that's totally possessed by an unclean spirit, and since he is demonically possessed, he has great power and great strength. So they chain him down, and he can break the chains. That's how strong Satan can be. He lived among the tombs, again, the unclean, okay? And no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain, for he had often restrained with shackles and chains. But the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke into pieces, and no one had strength to subdue him. So this is the activity of Satan. When Satan enters someone, it's a total possession, and you're given incredible strength. Night and day, verse 5, night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. Now, when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran down and bowed before him. So Satan knows who Jesus is. And there's a sense of homage here. It's very interesting. He ran and bowed down before him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he said to him, namely the demoniac, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." So this is a disjointed episode. There is a conversation that Jesus had before this one, and he would have said, "Unclean spirit, come out of him." And so now Mark has this addition to an earlier conversation. And so at this point, what do you have to do with me, Jesus of Nazareth, Son of the Most High God? I know who you are. In fact, we know exactly who you are. And in the case in the synagogue at Capharnaum, that unclean spirit said, "Have you come to destroy us?" Yeah. Wait your turn. So Jesus says, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" Now notice, Satan identifies Jesus correctly. We know who you are, the Holy One of God. We know who you are, and please, do not torment me. We know that you have jurisdiction over us. Yeah. And please do not torment me. So, and Jesus says, "What is your name?" So Satan identifies Jesus, or the unclean spirit identifies Jesus, and the evil one says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Now this has all sorts of historical issues here. So the man is possessed by many demons. We are many. We are legion. Now, some scholarship would indicate, since the spirit is an unclean spirit or non-kosher, and as the spirit lives in a man, can uncleanliness live in Israel? Yes, it's called the Roman Imperium. Gentile activity, Gentile occupation of the land of Israel. Roman legions, Roman authority, Roman law, Roman activity that at times persecutes religious activity of Israel. So by analogy, we have this individual inhabited by legion, and it's unclean because he lives among the tombs. And then conversely, we have Israel being occupied by Gentiles, by the Roman Imperium, polytheists, swine eaters, pig eaters, and they are unclean. And they inhabit Israel as the unclean spirit is habitually present in this possessed individual. Both are legion. Both are many. So some scholarship would suggest that this is an analogy of Roman occupation, Roman Gentile occupation, non-kosher occupation of Israel, God's bride. And so the issue of get this impurity out of Israel. and as it now relates to the possessed demoniac, drive out the demon from this individual. So there's a certain similitude, okay? Sometimes the emperor, when he would have his own coin with his image on the coin, in this case, to make a fuss, to make a fuss among the Israelites, it would have been Tiberius, I believe. Some of the coinage of Tiberius has his image, and on the reversal of the coin, you had an image of a swine. Yeah. So they know exactly what they're doing. The Jews would have had to handle that money. The image of a god, Tiberius, because he's a divine personage. And then in the reverse side, the image of a pig to upset the Israelites. This is very clear that legion is representational. It represents the demonic. So at this particular juncture, my name is Legion, we are many. And he begged him earnestly not to send him out into the country. The evil one wants to habitate, wants to live in something, okay? Now, there was on the hillside, a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, send us into the swine. Let us enter them. So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out, entered the swine and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. Now, Gadarene country is right by the Sea of Galilee, or the Sea of Gennesaret. You have multiple names here, or the Sea of Asphalt. That's another name for the Sea of Galilee. The problem is the imagery here in the text would indicate that this whole transaction is right by the Sea of Galilee. It is not by the Sea of Galilee. It's about 35 miles away. So there's something else going on here. So when Legion demands or asks permission to go into the swine herd, you're not going to have 2,000 swine going headlong 35 miles and drowning in the sea. That doesn't make sense. So obviously there is another issue here. This probably actually occurred, but then it is Haggadic. You add another interpretation or a moral, theological, or spiritual interpretation. That's classic Haggadic literature, where you have an actual historical existential event. It actually happened, and then for the purposes of showing divine activity, the writer imbues it with another level of meaning or interpretation. And that's what we call Haggadic literature, where you take an actual historical event and then add another moral, spiritual, or theological motif or understanding to it. And I think that's what we have here. I think this actually occurred, and to show that Jesus has dominance over creation, sky, sea, land, waves, he has dominance over animals and people. And since pigs are unclean animals, this is where we got to be very careful, folks, not to add 21st century ideological conceptualization to something 2,000 years earlier. Don't add the view of the 21st century about how we treat animals or whatever, or however you want to understand that last statement that I just got finished making. You know, don't apply something that doesn't fit. Okay, don't apply 21st century American understanding of SPCA, kindness to animals, to the Jews 2,000 years ago. It's a different world. It's a different way of understanding existence, whether animal life or human life. Okay, be very careful not to project something that doesn't, that simply won't fit. Okay, so and a lot of people say, well, why would Jesus cause 2,000 pigs to die? And do you call that loving? Do you call that godlike? Do you call that nurturing? It's a different motif. It's a different understanding of how we treat creatures. Okay, so you can deal with that any way that you so desire. The point is, it's a 35-mile trip from where Jesus was in Gerasene territory to the Sea of Galilee. I doubt that the pigs would go 35 miles, full steam ahead, and fall down and drop into the Sea of Galilee and then drown. There's something else going on here. And I think what is getting on here is the fact that Jesus wants to expel legion. He wants to expel Gentile influence in the land and life of Israel. That's the issue. So what happens? So the pigs drown. The swineherds ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then the people came to see what had happened, and they came to Jesus and saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had legion. And they were afraid. Those who had seen what had happened to the demoniac and to the swine reported it. So it's eyewitnesses here. Then they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. Whoever you are, Jesus, whatever you are, leave us. You know, obviously this is part of Gentile territory. These are not Jews. These are Gentile territory. Okay. We have the following. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by the demon begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus refused and said to him, no, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown you. Now, that's an interesting line here. The man is now in his right mind. The demons have left. He's in good stead, and he wants to follow Jesus. And Jesus says, no, I want you to be my disciple. And in being my disciple, this is what you're going to do. Go back to your home and tell your friends and your neighbor and your family how much the Lord has done for you. Now, notice how much the Lord, that's the formal name of God. But Jesus is the one that expelled the demons. Are you saying, Jesus, that you are Lord, the way God is Lord? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Jesus is Lord to the glory of God the Father. You want to see the revelation of God? You look at Jesus. Jesus is the revelation of God in human flesh. So we have Mark telling the demoniac, no, go home and you witness the fact that God has shown great mercy to you. Go home to your family, your friends. You now be the extension of my activity. You are now the extension of my activity. You are now the extension of my healing activity. And you now know me for what I am. I am the Lord. I can cast out Satan. I can settle and calm the seas, the wind, the air. I can make broken people whole again. I can cast out the evil one. I can make withered hands whole and straight again. I can forgive sins. Only God forgives sins. I can forgive sins. And I have jurisdiction over the Sabbath because I am the Lord. So Jesus tells this man, no, it is better for you not to follow me, but I'm sending you out on mission. You may not understand yet that this is why I am going to send you out, but understand you now have a commission to preach and teach and be the absolute embodiment of the mercy of God. God's tender, loving mercy has touched you. You were once tied up, shackled, restrained, and the evil one resided in you to the point that you had extreme manifestation of power and strength, and you howled among the tombs, bruising yourself, hurting yourself, because that's what Satan does. Satan wants to harm you. Satan wants to hold you captive. Jesus comes along to expel the evil. Jesus is the ultimate liberator. He liberates you from evil, from the darkness of the kingdom of Satan. Brings you to the kingdom of light, which is Jesus, which is God, through his Spirit. So now you are freed from this demonic past. You're free. You have been liberated. You can now go home. You can now be with your family. And I want you to tell them what the Lord in his great mercy has shown you. You're the sign. You're the sign of God's activity. Better for you not to travel with me. Better for you, and going to the text. He went away and began to proclaim to the Decapolis, the 10 cities, how much Jesus had done to him and done for him, and everyone was amazed. So he's totally obedient to the command of Jesus. Go to the 10 cities, go to the Gentiles, go and tell them how wonderful God is and how wonderful God has treated you. He's cast out darkness. He's cast out evil. He's made you well. And you're the living sign of hope. There are many people, we can tell by the gospel message, that there were many people possessed by the evil one. And let's get something straight here, okay? The Jews were able to see the distinction between mental illness and demonic possession, okay? Not everything was demonic, and not everything had a psychological, mental, foundational issue, okay? So when someone was possessed, that's that was a far cry different from someone who was just simply neurotic or psychotic or at wit's end. They could tell the difference. They may not have had the medical advancement that we have today, but on a very common level, they can tell whether or not this person is suffering from this or that personality disorder, as opposed to being ruled by the evil one. They were able to make distinctions. So it's not a matter of Jesus casting out mental illness found in pigs. I'm sorry. There's no transferring of some sort of mental disease found in a pig to a human being, or found in a human being to a pig. I'm sorry. No. There's no interspecies mental illness. Oh, I'm sorry. No. This is preposterous. So, yeah, there is a point where you can say, yeah, there's something psychologically wrong here. Yeah, okay, fine. But yet, in this case, or in that case, there's something far greater and far darker than just simply some personality disorder. There's something else going on. And the fact that the demoniac was so powerful that he can smash chains and rid himself of any type of enclosure, means that this is not just some sort of a personality issue. And what I'm basically saying is this: at the time of Jesus, and probably much earlier, there was a very clear understanding when someone had a personality disorder or just didn't get along with people, as opposed to somebody under the control of Satan. So we just don't simply psychoanalyze a theological reality. I know in today's society, people want to say, a Satan or devil. It's what we're doing is simply some form of personification of evil, or so there's really no devil whatsoever. There is no Satan. These are basically manifestation of pathological personalities. Well, you want to go that route, you can go that route, but I would urge you not to. No, there's a very clear issue about the Gospels. Jesus is casting out the evil one. And he gives that power to his disciples when they first start to preach. They start to preach and teach and expel demons. That's one thing that's very clear. Jesus acts as if Satan exists. He acts as if Beelzebul exists. He acts as if the demonic does have existence. And, why would he act in this way when he didn't have to? If you're only dealing with a psychological pathology, why do you have to personify it? There's no need to personify it, Are you saying that Jesus couldn't tell the difference? No, it's very clear that when the Pharisees and scribes and Sadducees are angry at Jesus as a point of a psychological concern, okay, that's different from someone who is being possessed by an unclean spirit, okay? So not everyone who's angry or distraught or acts in a way that's irrational does not necessarily mean that they are being possessed. Doesn't mean that, okay? So in this case, the man is possessed and exhibits extreme strength. And so therefore, this is not just a psychological pathology issue. This is a theological issue. And the good news is Jesus has power over it. Jesus can expel the opposite of himself in your life. Let me say that again. Jesus can expel the opposite of himself in your life. So if there's something that's there, we know today, for heaven's sakes, that like a lot of the stuff is 95% psychological, but there is that 5%. Perhaps there is that hidden percentile whereby they're dealing not just with some pathological issue due to some psychological foundation, but rather it's theological, and it's dark, and it's dangerous. The good news, Jesus has power over it. Okay, it's now time for question and answer. Brian?
Thank you, Father. We have one question in the chat right now. It's from Riley, and he says, why is it Jesus managed to get the unclean spirits out of the body so effortlessly, and yet the modern priests have trouble doing the same thing?
First of all, exorcism is sponsored by the church. And in order for a priest to exercise his ability to be an exorcist, you need permission. Okay? Not everyone has the ability or the faculty to exorcise. So in the church today, we do have priests that are exorcists, and with the permission of the bishop, after a period of analysis, investigation. So you have a person that exhibits a certain amount of pathology before a priest is ever called to do an exorcism. We first look at every psychological possibility that would give rise to that condition. We are not simply going to say, oh yes, call an exorcist and do this or that. No. We are very careful about how we treat mental illness or whatever pathology we have to deal with. And if there is evidential information after much testing that this might be a occasion for a exorcism, then a priest will be called. But the priest doesn't do it on his own authority. You have to have the authority of the church or the permission or the faculty from the church or from your bishop to do such a thing. And whenever you have an exorcism, you never do it by yourself. There are multiple priests, okay? It is a very dangerous activity because you're dealing with the evil one. And the evil one hates you. The evil one hates what you believe in. The evil one hates the fact that you've been called by God to be a faithful servant of God. The evil one hates you. And so if you're trying to exorcise the act of Satan from an individual, I can assure you the demon is out to get you. So yeah, this is a very serious matter, and it's not to be taken lightly, and it's not to be taken lightly to the point, oh, it's all psychological. No, I would not go that route. Yes, it is true that in most cases it is the actual causality would be psychological or something pathological. But to those areas and those concerns and those situations where it is much more than that, then the church has to wisely and very prudentially look at the situation after a thorough investigation, and then she would call this or that priest to exercise the faculty of an exorcist. Thank you, Riley. Anyone else?
If anyone else has a question, please just raise your hand or type it in the chat.
Quick question, Father.
Yes, go ahead.
Now, do these particular stories in Mark's gospel, do they align with the gospels of Matthew and Luke?
Yes, in fact, this is why we have the parallel narrative. Absolutely. Mark is in the center, Matthew and Luke are to the right and to the left. Yes, these are not isolated incidents. So the Gerasene demoniac is found in Matthew 8:28-34 and Luke 8:26-39, and of course Mark chapter 5, 1-20. Yes. So obviously this event captivated the mind of the early apostolic community. So this is why this is not to be dismissed lightly. The fact that this was present in a oral tradition, in story form or in Haggadic form, and then later written down and copied by two other gospel writers, means that this event had meaning for the apostolic community. Yes. So this is not to be dismissed as being some form of a folk tale or some sort of a wishful thinking episode where God cures this person who is being possessed by the evil one. No, for it to be in all three gospels. So there's a certain attestation of value. Jesus has power over the evil one. There's power over creation. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. Anyone else? If not, let me wind up. Jesus has power. He has that dynamis, the authority, the legitimizing authority coming from his Father to make broken people whole, to make sick people well, to cast out anything that alienates you from God. He has the power to do that. So when you look at your life, wherever you have been, and you see issues or situations that were not as good as they are now, and you were redeemed from them, thank God for that. Let grace be grace, let God be God. And if there are issues in your life today that tend to bound you to the point that, I wish I could do something about this, ask for the grace of God to give you that power, that dynamic infusion of faith, that God's mercy might readily be bestowed on you. Seldom, and I need to emphasize this, seldom do you need an exorcist. I'm sorry, seldom if ever. A lot of our stuff is, psychological, okay? But to those areas, and I've known priests that have had to deal with this, that there are some areas that are not just pathological, not just psychological, but something far greater and far more evil. But I think for most of us, it's us, it's our personality, it's how we deal with stress and tension, how we deal with people that move in and out of our lives. And what I like to say is that treat each other respectfully, lovingly. Okay? God bless, and we will continue Mark's Gospel tomorrow. Thank you for joining us this evening. Take care.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Good night.